The board member introduce them to you. First vice president is. I'd like to read what our plaque says. In honor of Congressman Henry A. Waxman, with deepest appreciation for over 45 years of outstanding public service. As a leader, you have represented Malibu, your congressional district, the state of California, and the American people with the highest level of integrity, vision, and concern for the well-being of the people and the environment. March 16, 2014, Malibu Democratic Bus. Allow you to respond. I'd like to have and tell us more about what he has done for all of us. I want to give something that Mrs. Waxman can also enjoy.
I was looking at the frame and thinking I'm going to enjoy that. The piano. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. It's very kind.
I'll have to check with ethics.
I think you have it below the limits.
Sweet.
Do I get to respond? Well, thank you so much, Jay Goodman, and I'm delighted to be here, and not just to talk about what's going on, but to receive these accolades. It's beautiful. I don't care if it's below the monetary value that the Ethics Committee permits. To me, this is invaluable.
And
to
love.
have this kind of recognition.
And love.
And love. Thank you so much. I have been honored to represent you in the Congress of the United States, and I didn't represent this area in the State Assembly before, but that accounts for the more than 40 years that I've been in public office. There's a lot to complain about. I mean, you look at Congress today, you look at the way some of these people have behaved that are in positions of power, but there's a lot to feel good about, so I want to make this a more positive presentation. Nothing ever happens easily. It takes a lot of hard work to get legislation passed. And I know, because I probably passed more bills into law than anybody in the House of Representatives, maybe with the exception of John Dingell, but that's only because he takes credit for some of the bills I authored. But I've always felt that I came to Congress because I believe government is essential in helping people. We hear a lot about we don't want government, we don't need government, we want to shrink government. But if we didn't have government fighting for people, there are a lot of Americans who would just go without. And we see right now a lot of Americans going without unemployment insurance, which is shocking, or going without health care, which we're correcting, or going without jobs, which is a disgrace.
Yeah.
We need to be there to provide opportunities for every child, a good health, good education, to be able to move through the economic opportunities in this country, up the economic ladder, to fulfill their full potential as human beings. That is something I've always felt strongly about. I was the first member of the family to go to college, and my parents inculcated me with the idea education is important, and that Democrats have always stood for helping people go to the middle class and helping the middle class be able to prosper. The other thing we need to always remember is that we've got to have a government that protects the safety net, that's there to help people when they need help, whether it's unemployment insurance, whether it's Medicare, which is a program and Social Security, which are programs designed to be there for the elderly. It used to be, and I just want to underscore this because people forget, it used to be that seniors were the largest growing group in poverty before they had Social Security and before they had Medicare. Even Medicare was only adopted in 1965, for those of you who think of 1965 as only. But before that, seniors would lose all their financial well-being because they had to pay for their health care. And we decided to correct that. And recently we have corrected it for the rest of the country by giving every American an opportunity to buy health insurance, notwithstanding the fact they have a pre-existing medical condition where insurance companies wouldn't want to cover them, or they couldn't afford it. We wanted to make sure that everybody has access, and the Affordable Care Act is a great bill. It's not the end of the story. It's going to evolve, but it at least puts us on the path to making sure everybody gets health insurance and making sure we can hold down the cost of health care because we're paying for the quality of care, not just quantity. More and more services that may or may not even be needed, which drives up the health care costs. So I've been proud to play a role in the health area, particularly because that has always been my area of primary concentration. But the environment is an area that I think that we need to be mindful of. The committee that I chaired, the subcommittee I chaired, the full committee that I chaired, had jurisdiction over environmental issues related to health. And so we authored the Clean Air Act, which has made a world of difference in the LA area. We used to be held up as the Mexico City or Beijing in terms of air pollution. It's not, we've done away with the problem, but given the economic growth, more cars on the road, and more jobs, more people moving here, we control the amount of air pollution here, and we're trying to do other things in the area that the Clean Air Act touches, such as toxic air pollutants that cause cancer and birth defects, the danger to the upper ozone, and making sure that we don't pollute our national forests and protect the air in other areas as well. I authored the Clean Air Act. It passed on a bipartisan basis. I authored a lot of bills. They all had Republican support. A lot of the laws needed Republican presidents to sign the laws. So I always work to reach out to the other side of the aisle. We're now, unfortunately, at a time when there are sizable numbers of Republicans who make up the majority of the Republicans in the House who believe that compromise is a dirty word, and that to talk to Democrats and work out issues is like working with the enemy, which is absurd. We're Americans. We have different points of view, but we need to compromise. We need to look for opportunities for the well-being of the American people. I want to touch on just a few issues and then answer questions. And I know you have many candidates here, and this is probably the last time you'll want to hear from me because you're going to have more and more candidates coming here for the June primary and then coming back for the November election. There's a lot of political activity now. The pent-up demand for office is now being unleashed. And after 40 years, you can imagine this would be the case. But I decided to retire, not because Congress is so difficult, because Congress is always difficult. But I decided to retire because 40 years is a long period of time, and it's really time for somebody new. It's time for somebody young to come in there and fight these battles. And it's a time for Janet and I to look to the life after Congress. I'm not going to sit at the beach. If I were to sit at the beach, I would want to come right here. And I want to come right here occasionally. But I'm going to be looking for other things to do. I will not be a lobbyist. I will not be advocating for those interests that I've been fighting all these years. I'm going to continue to look for ways to advance the cause for people who need an advocate for them. as I tried to do in the Congress of the United States. But I'm going to move on, and you'll have opportunities for some wonderful candidates, some of whom are here now, and others you'll have a chance to meet for the House of Representatives, for the State Senate, for the supervisorial district. I don't know if this is Zeb's district or not.
Yes.
Is it? Okay, so you have a race for supervisor, and we've got to make sure that the other office holders that have done such a good job, such as Richard Bloom, continue in office. I assume that you're Richard Bloom. What's going on now that I really want to touch on? I think the unfinished job of our time is to deal with climate change. People don't want to deal with it. Republicans think it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And they think it doesn't exist because they don't want to recognize that they're funding based. The oil and the coal industries are going to have to change their ways. So the polluters that cause climate change are arguing to leave things alone, which is a mistake for them, let alone the rest of the world. And a lot of Republicans deny the science. They don't want to listen to science, which is a very unhealthy trend in a number of areas where we used to look at science as not a political opinion, but based on evidence. And you test hypotheses, and if the evidence supports it, you then figure that you act always with imperfect knowledge, but act nevertheless. To be the climate change offers such a threat that if you look at it, that there's a 10% chance that the dire predictions are true. Why would we take a 10% chance on the ozone? I mean, on the atmosphere that we all share? Because if they're wrong, the consequences are enormous. Plus, the benefits of doing something are so great. If we start reducing the pollution from the energy sector, use alternative energy, figure out new technology to use existing energy without polluting, such as carbon capture, that coal from the utilities. Coal is ubiquitous, it's cheap. We now subsidize it because they don't pay the full costs of the consequences of burning it. But the consequences of burning it are horrendous to public health and to the planet. And if we can develop technology to burn it safely, that's a technology that everybody in the world is going to want to buy. It would be so beneficial for our economy. People don't look at the bigger picture. So climate change to me is the unfinished job. The reason I feel comfortable enough to leave at this moment is I recognize Congress is not going to do much of anything at the moment. But the President is taking it on, using existing law, including the Clean Air Act, which I authored, as a basis for regulations that will limit the amount of pollution from the coal-burning power plants. Moving toward motor vehicles that are either hybrid or electric or hydrogen or whatever the technology would be that will pollute less. We're moving in the right direction, and the President has the tools, and he's willing to use them. Right now, if you went to the House of Representatives, you'd hear, when they have opportunities to give speeches, how the President is acting in an unconstitutional way. Well, he's acting in a way they don't like, but he certainly has the constitutional right to enforce the laws. And they don't like it. They don't like him to enforce the Affordable Care Act. They don't like him to enforce the environmental laws. They don't want him to do anything unless it's what they want, but they lost the presidential election. And so climate change is moving forward. The other unfinished job for this country is the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Hear ye.
We need a strong middle class. We need to give people opportunities. We need to get jobs to the American people. And the sad thing of the last 5 years is that the Republicans have tried to block and successfully block so much of the Obama economic program. There are two things that are being pushed right now, and I hope successfully, we've got to fight for them, that will make a huge difference. One is to raise the minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage isn't just for the people who are going to benefit from that increased salary. they're all very low-income people. Imagine, we have people working who are on food stamps, on welfare. People work a job and more than one job just to get by. And husbands and wives both have to work. But if they put in all that work and effort, they ought to be able to have a livable wage. And so we need to make sure that working people have a minimum wage that is some sign of decency. And it will help our economy because this is money that's going to be spent and going to help create jobs. And the second thing we need is something that Republicans liked at one time, and we've got to get them to come back to it. It's the earned income tax credit. Telling people who work that we are going to help subsidize them if they're working. That we're going to give them a tax credit and let them keep their money rather than have to even pay taxes at all, or maybe even get some refund from the government to make sure that the money they earn they can keep and support themselves. This will help enormously. It's not the answer to all of our problems, but it's very important. And then the other thing that I want to touch on is that don't give up hope. The reason we're Democrats is we believe in government because we think government can be helpful, government can be a problem, government can be a barrier, but government services used wisely benefits us all. I don't think people at the top will benefit so much in the recovery of the economy, because most of the recovery is going to the people at the very top. I don't think they can think of themselves as uninterested in what government does. It's interesting, we drove through a gate to get into this. You can't build the gates high enough. You can't go out and hire your own security, send your kids to private schools. You have a litigation, you hire a private judge, and say, well, I don't care about anybody else, I can just buy whatever I need. You cannot live in a decent society where we don't recognize we have things in common. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. We've got to make sure that those are safe enough for good health. And we've got to also recognize that if you think you're going to go ahead with your success and leave everybody else behind, it is an unstable, insecure world. And that's not what we want in the United States of America. So I'm going to leave time for questions, and I don't know how much time you have available. So
Yeah, you do it.
I think this gentleman had his hand up first, and we'll just try to get as many questions.
okay, then you'll call. Great.
Just want to thank you for your amazing 40 years of service. I'm from Boston, and we have a lot of Waxman groupies in Boston. On behalf of all the have-nots here in this room, I have a question for you that I'd like an answer from that will come from someone who just left office, not someone who's in office and running again. You probably know about American Prosperity with Koch brothers, and American Crossroads with Karl Rove, and the national campaign they're running against the Affordable Care Act in order to take back the House, in order to increase their majority in the House and take back the Senate. What I'm reading lately, and I'm a political media consultant, and so I work for Biden and Parkin and Leahy and friends of yours, it seems to me that a lot of Democrats this year, because they're afraid of these attacks, are going to throw the Affordable Care Act under the bus. Do you think that Democrats should defend the Affordable Care Act or back away from it in these midterm elections?
You raised a number of provocative issues just in your comments, because I do care very deeply about the fact that the financial backing for candidates is now wide open to a lot of what the Supreme Court calls individuals or really corporations with the ability to put in unlimited money, and people like the Koch brothers just pouring in millions to try to choose the representatives in this country. And I find that very dangerous. I think we've got to correct the campaign finance system, but we'll do that for another time. The question is the Affordable Care Act. When there's an election, there are many people on the Democratic side that get very nervous. And so the administration's tried to figure how to calm them down while the Affordable Care Act is being implemented. There have been some concessions made, but I think that those concessions that are somewhat political are temporary. But the Affordable Care Act is going to go into place, is already serving so many millions of people, and it is going to be viewed in hindsight as a great success. And for many, it's right now a great success, especially for those who were never able to get insurance before, or now can get it at a much better price. There are some things that have been delayed, and I'm not troubled by it. What I would be troubled is if we delayed the individual requirement that people buy insurance, because that undermines the whole law. And that's what the Republicans have been offering over and over again on the House floor. In fact, I'll just share this with you to know how cynical some of this is. Medicare. Medicare is a separate program, and the Affordable Care Act did a few things with Medicare, which basically improved it, but left it alone for the most part. Medicare pays the providers. And so if you go to see a doctor under Medicare, your doctor sends the bill and gets paid. If you belong to a managed care plan, the managed care plan gets paid by Medicare and they pay the doctors. But the doctors are facing a 23 or 4% reduction in their reimbursement. Well, that doesn't make sense. And they're facing it because of a law that I knew when it was first passed wasn't going to work. That was when Clinton was president, and they voted against it. It had what's called sustainable growth rate. The growth of physician fees would be restrained, and if they didn't restrain it enough, then they'd be reduced. Well, it just didn't make sense. It's price controls over doctors' fees that really didn't live up to the real world. So we've come across this situation where doctors are insecure, not knowing whether they're going to be reimbursed for the services they give. And we never let them get the reduction. But everybody agrees we should change it, because it doesn't make sense. And so we worked on a bipartisan basis to eliminate this SGR on physician fees for Medicare. And we were ready to pass it. And in the House, they said, oh, great, we're going to pay for it by doing away with the individual requirement that people get health insurance. Well, that would undermine the whole Affordable Care Act. And we ended up voting no against this bill just a couple of days ago. It's a bill, it's like everything they do in the House is for propaganda. It's not going to happen, thank God, because we have a Senate that won't pass it. We have a president that won't sign it. But we leave this in limbo. And for those of you who are on Medicare or know people on Medicare, if they hear from their doctors, there's always that sense our doctors are going to still see me under the Medicare program. Now, the truth of the matter is, doctors have said to me over and over again, I prefer Medicare to private insurance, because Medicare usually pays the bills. Private insurance will figure out ways not to pay the bill, and you have to keep going after them to get paid. So the irony was the doctors, which had been a major conservative force in the country, wanted health insurance. They wanted a single-payer system because they understood that made more sense. But we had to go along with private insurance plans in order to get the bill passed, rather than a real radical change. And the President, I think, acted rightly. Affordable Care Act is in place. It's going to be in place, and it's going to be a success. And some Democrats can try to run away from it, and the administration is helping them a little bit. But I think we ought to defend what we've done and be proud of it. We ought to defend the contributions of the Democratic Party, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. We ought to defend our positions on the environment. We ought to defend our views that we want this to be a more just and fair society.
So if you were a consultant, you would advise your candidate to campaign on the Affordable Care Act?
Well, it depends on the district. There may be other issues that are more important in that district.
You started to.
Why don't you call on?
Okay, you started to talk about campaign finance,
Yes.
and I'm running for supervisor for Zev's office, and one of the issues we see is the money. And how can we address this now with the Supreme Court McHutchison decision, which is going to come down, which will most likely eliminate individual campaign aggregate spending? So in the congressional races now, it's gone. And I worry about my kids who are 14 and 12. In 4 years since the Supreme Court Citizens United and now corporations are people, with the money, I don't think the Democratic Club, the Democratic Party, can compete with money. So what can we do to level the playing field so we can get people up there who will continue to support the programs? What's the answer?
Well, the Supreme Court based its decision on their reading of the Constitution, which I think was incorrect, but the law is what 5 judges out of 9 say it is. And so they opened up this loophole for corporations and individuals to give unlimited money to what they call non-profit organizations. And all the crying about the IRS going after the right wing. Well, they're going after the right wing and everybody because of all this taking advantage of what the Supreme Court has opened up. So people would claim they're non-profit when they're really a charade to give unlimited money to political campaigns. The first thing we need that we can do without changing the Constitution is disclosure. If you knew that the Koch brothers had put in the money, and you knew the Koch brothers stood for the oil industry and the fossil fuel industries and retrograde politics, that would make a difference. Right now, there's no disclosure. So we're pushing hard for a law to require disclosure. But I think that the Citizens United opinion can be overturned. I've joined in sponsoring a change in the Constitution. That's tough to get. But maybe the court will look at it differently in a few years. And I'm not so sure that decision is going to go the wrong way on the aggregate spending of individual contributors. It might not, but I'm not so sure of it. So we've got to fight back. We can't just say we're finished, we're done, we'll never get into power. So we've got to fight with those things. On the supervisor, I was talking to Senator Ernst-Lofsky last night. He said he wrote the law on funding the campaign.
It's voluntary, though. Not everyone agreed to.
I know, but when people don't voluntarily accept the term, it limits, it opens up the opportunity for others to raise a lot of money to match it. And he said that Bobby Schreiber last week said that he's not going to abide by the limits because he's got so much individual money he could put in it. Well, you know, maybe. I just had a guy that ran against me 2 years ago who thought he could buy the congressional seat with $8 million in his own money. I can't compete against a guy with $8 million. I can't match $8 million, but I didn't need to match $8 million because people knew he was putting $8 million in and he was really a Republican. People understood what was going on. So anyway, money doesn't always win. I can go through all the list of wealthy candidates that didn't make it.
Following along with this in Citizens United, I'm Ellen Lubick, a semi-retired educator in public policy and higher ed. I'd like to know your assessment of education issues, particularly in light of number one, LAUSD, with all the millions of dollars that the billionaires poured into our school board election, which was totally bizarre, but growing, and they're doing it across the country. And also the Obama-Arne Duncan plan to charterize much of America's public school system. We're seeing charters, for-profit, take over so much of public school land and be embedded in school districts. California has the largest number of charter schools in the nation. Many of us are working against this privatization. We're very concerned about it. Please give us an idea of your feelings.
Well, you're picking an issue where I have no real overriding philosophy of it. I want us to do the best for the kids. But I cannot understand those who think that the reason our education system has failed is because of teachers. How can you educate our kids if we don't promote goodwill with the teachers and get the teachers to do the best job for the kids? And I've seen too many people act as if the teachers are the problem, that they're the enemy for good education. You can't have a system where we don't pay teachers adequately and have that as an attractive profession, and then criticize the people who are working so hard as teachers, some of whom are very, very dedicated, and then pick on them that they've been there too long. So I have a lot of visceral feelings about that. It troubles me. On the other hand, I think there are charter schools that do a very good job. And so I'm not against charter schools. I decided early on that when I hear the arguments on education policy, my head starts spinning. And I try to figure out health policy and environmental policy and a lot of other things. So I've sort of said, let others figure this out. And I was amazed at the race for the LA USD school board, where millions of dollars are coming into their office and people who felt very strongly about changing the system. There were 2 good candidates running, a lot of money being spent, and things were being said that didn't seem to be accurate. So I just thought it was an amazing thing, and I don't feel comfortable when people feel they have the answer.
The
It's got
answer.
to be open to different possibilities.
Thank you. This is associated with the Committee on Global Warming, but you haven't addressed the congestion, traffic congestion, and also Malibu's future with general plans and high-rise. It evolves. A lot of planning has gone into the mass transit train, but I think there needs to be a backup if it doesn't work. There's a lot of cynicism that it isn't going to work. There are ideas out there.
Some of which you have shared with us.
Yes, and there's people here that are running for office, and I'm afraid that, as in the past, we're going to be stuck with ever more congestion unless there's a backup plan, such as not driving 1 day a week, with the exception of commercial licensed vehicles. There's too many cars on the road. You have to take out the cars. And there's alternatives that can be enhanced, such as carpooling and bike racks on the buses as such, and et cetera.
What's the question?
Well, I think he wants to know what we're going to do about congestion and traffic and what does the future hold. And I think that's a very big issue every time I'm in town. I not only hear about it, I feel it. I'm trying to get from one place to another. There are a lot of creative ways we can deal with this. Obviously, more mass transit is essential, but other ways to encourage people not to get in their car and drive all the time. Some of that's just happening because of the reality. You just can't get around it. So a lot of people are looking at their own area to be most involved in terms of their jobs, their shopping, and everything else. You have an idea of certain times that cars will be able to be on the road and not be on the road. I think that's worth looking at, and I would agree with General Counsel.
One thing you did not mention, and that's oversight. You, for many years, had oversight over the Medicare and the Medicaid program. I am concerned that what's been happening in the Congress over the last 5 or 6 years, that the oversight has become a political football as opposed to making sure that the agencies do what they're supposed to do. I'd like you to comment on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've always argued that Congress, people think, is only there to pass laws.
Right, it's not true.
Doing oversight and investigations is as important, if not more important, a job for Congress. And I was chairman of a separate committee that's called the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And we did a lot of investigations that I thought were very helpful, trying to find out how existing laws were working or not working. Sometimes just putting a spotlight on a problem helps solve it, as we did with the tobacco issue in the 1990s. But we held oversight hearings on the waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayers' money in Iraq and Afghanistan, the billions of dollars that were thrown away in contracts with Halliburton, the outing of the CIA agent Valerie Plame, and what that did for trying to advance the Bush administration by undermining the reason to hold her name confidential, endangering her and her contacts as a CIA agent. And so we did a long list of genuine oversight hearings that had a purpose. Now the chairman of the committee is Darrell Issa, a fellow Californian, and he thinks that it's only for grandstanding.
Yeah.
And he'll make an accusation for political reasons, not have the evidence to support it, and then move on when people criticize him to the next accusation. And he just feels no sense of credibility. That's shocking to me that people would feel that they shouldn't be believable. Because I always felt if you're going to have any influence, you've got to make sure that you're not making mistakes. You're getting the facts straight. And because I always knew the Republicans would pounce on me if I made statements that were not accurate. But they don't seem to care about accuracy. Truth is not a reason why they have to stick to it. They can just go beyond it. So I think you're absolutely right.
Me? Okay. I worked in the air pollution field for like 14 and a half years. And some of the things that you said are true. I noticed that when they were using propane, it's not a methane gas that creates what they call the bubble across and causes. They used to use propane gas in the 70s. Bless you. The 70s, early 70s, they used to have the conversions that became very popular, and all of a sudden they just did away with all the having resources for propane, which would have caused us not to be dependent as much on the fossil fuels as much. Also, it works with the hybrids, and they won't sell it where you can use propane. It's all gasoline or diesel, and there's very few companies, car companies, that are using diesel and hybrid. Most of them are only available overseas. Nothing available over in the U.S. And so I don't know why they made that decision they did, but I think that if they would create or allow us to be able to buy alternative vehicles where we could use propane, it would be a good help in the air environment, where we would see less and less. Yeah, we would see less and less.
Well, you may well be right. I don't know enough about propane or any particular fuel, but we certainly have a strong incentive now for the auto industry to look for ways to get a more efficient use of gasoline. If we use gasoline, a lot of them are hybrids, so we use gasoline and electricity. We have all electric cars. I want the incentive to be there, not to dictate the solution, but to make a strong incentive that the automobile industry and the other industries will see it in their financial picture to try to be less polluting. That's why I wouldn't put a price on carbon. By putting a price on carbon, either through a cap and trade or through a tax, you give the strong market signal that the industry groups are going to benefit if they are less polluting. There's no reason why any industry wants to pollute less if they can continue to pollute and not have to do anything about it, either to pay for their externalities or to have any reason to reduce the pollution. So propane is successful. We want to move in the right direction where people can see the economic benefit of it.
You mentioned the wealth divide. You mentioned raising the minimum wage. During the recovery, many of the jobs created are in retail. And there's been a lot of talk